You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you gotta sing right along. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. You gotta clap when the Spirit says clap. You gotta clap when the Spirit says clap. When the Spirit says clap, you gotta clap right along. You gotta clap when the Spirit says clap. You gotta snap when the Spirit says snap. You gotta snap when the Spirit says snap. When the Spirit says snap, you gotta snap right along. You gotta snap when the Spirit says snap. You gotta stomp when the Spirit says stomp. You gotta stomp when the Spirit says stomp. When the Spirit says stomp, you gotta stomp right along. You gotta stomp when the Spirit says stomp. You gotta whisper when the Spirit says whisper. You gotta whisper when the Spirit says whisper. When the Spirit says whisper, you gotta whisper right along. You gotta whisper when the Spirit says whisper. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. When the Spirit says shout, you gotta shout right along. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. You gotta speak when the Spirit says speak. You gotta speak when the Spirit says speak. When the Spirit says speak, you gotta speak right along. You gotta speak when the Spirit says speak. You gotta jump when the Spirit says jump. You gotta jump when the Spirit says jump. When the Spirit says jump, you gotta jump right along. You gotta jump when the Spirit says jump.